No convincing link between Iraq and Al Qaeda.
This meeting was really a response to what is a national groundswell of sort of local by local, city by city, Central Labor Council by Central Labor Council, consolidation of opposition against the war. That just sort of happened in isolation from each other, but because everybody's sort of aware of the same kind of problems. At some point, as I and others started getting indications of all the resolutions that were passing, we started thinking about the need for people to start actually talking to each other. The people from New York need to talk to the people from San Francisco, et cetera, et cetera.
With this change since the fall, where many unions have begun to come out against the war in Iraq, I think it began to become possible to think about having a national conference. And so, for example, the Bay Area group and the New York group began to talk about that, and at the same time, Gene Bruskin, who's with the AFL-CIO Food and Service Trades, as an individual, he began to consider that, as did Bob Mullenkamp, apparently. And so there were discussions that went on sort of among various parts of that group and some others to try to bring this together. Each bringing, I think, from where they had the most strength. So we had the most strength among the rank and file and local unions that have taken anti-war positions already in some cases, or that have for some time. And so we tried to bring those contacts. The higher level, I think, official labor people were brought more by Bob Mullenkamp and perhaps Gene Bruskin, and we try to marry those two to some degree, try to have an overlap and a convergence of these previously existing labor anti-war committees with some of the more recent unions that are willing to take an anti-war position.
You know, a number of us started thinking, well, how can we pull people together in the same city? And really, it was actually a somewhat ad hoc decision of a few of us to just we got a hold of some good lists, some different people that have been collecting them. We got a number of people to sign on to an invitation letter, and we sent it out to all the opposition, all the unions that are on record, and all the individual leaders are on record, and we just started working it from there.
We passed a resolution a couple of months ago, I believe it was October 20th, or November 20th, excuse me, at our general meeting, and we passed it overwhelmingly. It was like about 400 to 1. And evidently it got on the internet and hit the newspapers, and I kept getting calls from radio stations and newspapers, and Bob Mullenkamp called me from New York. Bob and I worked together. He asked me if I wanted to try to put together a meeting for people, unions against the war, and I told him, yeah, I'd be glad to host one here. We're centrally located, it'd be easy to get at, and that's basically how it came about.
Well, I think it's been a wonderful meeting. We got a lot of people together, over 100 people from all over the country, to unite the voice against the war. There have been a lot of union people arguing against this war, but now we've come together as a single group to work against it. I myself have a son who's on a ship in the Persian Gulf. He's in the Marines, and I don't want to see him go in and either get killed, get wounded, or have to kill or wound innocent Iraqi civilians.
I think it was a really good process, and the fact that we were able to hear a lot of different people's views and hear things that we might not think about ourselves. My local is pretty leftist, and people are on board against the war, but it was interesting talking to other trade unionists that have other obstacles to overcome. So I think it was really good for people to come together and talk about those things.
Do you see the wording of this final resolution to be chiseled in stone, or do you see people leaving here and promoting their own resolutions?
Well, I'm sure people will promote their own resolutions, and that's fine. I think the point about this was not so much to have necessarily have one resolution that is one size fits all. If it doesn't fit, then people should use other resolutions. And I think the result, although perhaps not the most artfully crafted result, is nonetheless something that in terms of content doesn't, I don't believe, contain anything that that anybody should find objectionable. It's simply a basic statement that labor should be and is against the war, or at least that the labor people here are, and which I think is certainly broad enough to take to other places and other unions and other union bodies and have people adopt. If it's easier to get something else adopted, then by all means, people should do that in their local unions. Because in the end, although I certainly was concerned with the wording of the particular resolution here, I think what ends up happening is that what's paid attention to, if anything is, about these resolutions is not the wording per se, but the ultimate bottom line, which is it an anti-war statement? And so that's why, although you have many different resolutions having been adopted by different unions around the country, really what they're presented as is this is the 5th, 6th, 10th, 20th labor anti-war resolution, regardless of whatever differences there may be between the language. And that is the most important bottom line.
Well, one glaring omission was the issue of oil. I don't think it's hard for anyone to understand that this war is about oil and that the ones who will benefit will be oil corporations and military contractors. But I think that it's good in that it points out who will be victimized, that is, the people who will be bombed of Iraq and people of other countries, as well as working class women and men in the United States.
Are you satisfied with the results today?
I think it was great. It was tough because people, are struggling to figure out how to be effective and how to be clear and how to be broad. We don't want it to be just, people talking to each other who already agrees. So we had to really do a lot of hard thinking together and made a lot of good compromises. And if this kind of discussion went on in local and international labor unions all over the country, it would be a huge step forward.